And about 10 years ago, we released the NXDN protocol and support for that now has become an international standard. And we did things that people said couldn't be done, like placing intelligent communications across a 6.25 kilohertz channel. Kilohertz, not megahertz, 6.25 kilohertz. And, you know, we were the Internet of Things are really narrow.
The Internet of Things?
Things, yeah, as I said backstage, things. So we released a protocol, it's been very successful. There's been other, you know, technologies that come along, digital technology that we developed and have released to the marketplace has been greatly successful. We have a huge distribution of SMRs, and if you look back, you know, even further, the SMRs actually started what became Nextel and all. So it's really been a evolutionary process. This still continues. Land mobile being extremely reliable and considered mission critical, enterprise critical.
Right. So also in 2008, that was when the first D-Block auction went bad. Nobody made a qualifying bid, and so the thought at that time was, you know, got to start over from scratch. Rishi, do you remember any of that stuff? No pain points there, right?
Yeah, we're from the government. We're here to help, right?
That's right. That's right. So 2008 to now, obviously we've evolved significantly from not only a technology perspective for public safety broadband, but from a business model perspective as well. Back in those days, you know, I was on this very stage pounding the fist saying it has to be private. And that was really built up by public safety and the voice of public safety, moving from push to talk to private LTE for broadband. And what we learned in the last 10 years is that economically that just isn't feasible. And we're setting the course, I think, for the world here in the US with FirstNet and the way we're deploying public safety broadband, with the goal of ultimately going to give us the same functionality as a virtually private network. So a lot has happened. I think we've learned a ton. I think moving forward from 2008 to now, the interesting thing is what we can do with IoT. Some of the things that are evolving that are going to make FirstNet wildly successful. So going back to those days, Donnie, I think a lot has changed. A BTOP, you know, as funny as it was back then that we picked a few select cities that were going to basically win the lottery and deploy a network, which was an interesting, you know, scenario that the government put forward. But we learned a ton from BTOP. We learned a ton on how you deploy public safety broadband, what are some of the key requirements, what are some of the use cases, and what are the economics behind it, and how can you actually make the economics work, and in what cases do they not work, which is what I think landed us to where we are now. So tons of learning in the last 10 years, which has been fantastic.
No question. And then also in 2008, a little thing called LTE got deployed for the first time in Italy. Justin, you tell us a little bit about what LTE was then, and some of the attributes that were attributed.
Sure. I mean, so like we're now entering our 8th year of having a commercial nationwide LTE network. You know, just to give you some ideas in terms of the length and investment we've put into that network. And I'd say back in 2008 when we got some spectrum, you know, we were looking at 20 megahertz nationwide. We knew that wasn't enough to you know, survive on for the next 10 to 15 years. So obviously we've been adding more and more spectrum over the past 8 years, but we've also changed the technology quite a bit. And so I think back in 2008, the plan was, you know, we've got this commercial 3G or 2G network, if you will, and we're going to replicate that with 4G. We're going to add more bandwidth, more capacity, you know, broader coverage. Obviously, we've adopted a very collaborative environment. I think collaboration breeds innovation, and I think that's obviously what you'll see in a lot of our 5G deployment as well. But for 4G, I think today we're in a spot now where there's so much collaboration going on, and we're really talking about not just this, you know, broad commercial network, but then also the ability to make it very dense. And in densification, You need to go in building. You need to go into areas where we have spectrum, but maybe we don't have coverage because we don't have physical rights to the land or to put towers in there. And I think that the technology is moving to a place commercially where now we can go into a private LTE environment where we now have more of a collaborative product that is not just a private LTE island, isolated, from everything but the internet, but really an island that we've now, kind of combined into a commercial network, allowing more of a pedestrian, Internet of Things, or even mobile workers, field workers being able to move from a private LTE environment to a public LTE environment. And there's a lot of different technologies that we've deployed to be able to do that, such as centralized RAN and virtualized RAN and Open RAN.
Okay, we'll get more into that later. But just so, if I remember right now, in 2008, LTE, there was no voice. It was just data.
Just
It was
data.
going to be a while before we even got to telephony voice. It was release 8 or release 7, I forget, of the 3G.
9 or 10, I think, is what we went with in 2010.
That was in 2010, but yeah. And well, bottom line was, it was mostly slideshows in 2008, as opposed to something that was real, which was very interesting from a public safety perspective, because they were trying to get the D block, and so the public safety guys had to try to come up with what it is they wanted, without any idea what LTE really was. And I've actually been quite surprised that they actually did as good a job as they did, given the circumstances.
That made it work.
What's that?
That made it work.
Exactly. So Trey, what were you doing in 2008?
Well, 2008, we were building applications to allow multimedia to be streamed actually over the LTE networks that the carriers and operators were creating. We were designing applications for, OTT to mobile phone. We had the first multimedia mobile player with content libraries. But,
Okay. And
we were a consumer of the traffic that these guys were trying to stand up the networks to help, right?
and things were changing for me too. We used this thing called paper, and we printed a magazine and all sorts of wild stuff. You wouldn't believe it, And if I remember, and the other thing at that point was the iPhone had just come out, and today, WhatsApp's a big application, but then that was the legitimate question: what is an app? What is an app? And also, I think the next year or two, the FCC came out with his Broadband Report, and the Broadband Report said we need to clear a bunch of spectrum, but we need to clear it under 3 gigahertz because that's the only stuff that anyone will ever use, and it seems to have changed now, Justin. You guys found a couple of pieces of change between the couch cushions and bought some spectrum. At what, 28 gigahertz? Is that right?
28 gigahertz and 39 gigahertz are two of the spectrum blocks that we are using for 5G. And I think that last year we did 11 different cities across the country in a pre-commercial 5G trial, as a proving ground, really, to understand what is, how does that frequency operate, how do you put data over that frequency, and I think we're very pleased to see how that turned out in a residential broadband environment, and I think that, as we look forward, my team is heavily focused on how do we take that into a business environment, including public sector and public safety.
Okay, and also back then, I believe the thought was, well, carriers want you to be on the network because that's how they get paid. Things have changed a little bit there too, haven't
Drop
they?
off. Carriers want you off their network. They don't want that data on their network no more. They think they do, but they don't. It's crippling the critical infrastructure that they're currently trying to deploy and patch the holes that they're creating. Every single day that we add a new device, a new pipe, more data flowing across it. Verizon, AT&T, Sprint alike, they don't want that data on their networks no more. They want to drop off and get it out.
And we want to give you that data so we have a higher speed pipe.
Right.
Absolutely. So Rishi, in terms of offloading, what are the best ways for folks to do that? And how important is it to the overall health of an operator?
So offloading is an interesting topic, right? We offload to Wi-Fi all the time, right? The average consumer doesn't realize how many times you're actually on Wi-Fi versus cellular network. But offloading is important, but not only is offloading important, but scaling your network and moving into 5G, as my friend and partner and customer Verizon is doing, allows you to bring more capacity into the network so we can do more. So offloading doesn't become so strenuous and a challenging situation for the network infrastructure.
I think there's also something to be said about security. So I think, if you look at the consumer models and, walking around and getting on Wi-Fi might be okay because you're not really as concerned about, who you're streaming Netflix over. Right. But certainly from a business application perspective, we've done a lot of research. We just released a security report 2 weeks ago around mobility and making sure people understand, what the threats are if you are on public Wi-Fi versus, a cellular or even a private Wi-Fi. And so I think that's one of the things that we've been trying to make sure people at least make sure that it's secure, they're changing passwords, and it's kind of eye-opening to see how much businesses are not following just the simplest best practices.
Really? Okay. So Don, since 2008, how have you seen the LMR industry mature?
Well, LMR, I mean, we have been part of the mission critical, enterprise critical marketplace. Cellular's come a long way with coverage, but we've come a long ways in that, we are still, you can't drop a call on land mobile. If you drop a call on land mobile, somebody's going to bring out the baseball bat and yell and scream at you. But we are also a user of these wideband services because as we've migrated to digital, and in a lesser extent, even in later analog, we use the networks for backhaul. We have to have pipe. And so you've got to get up on some pipe that you can connect multiple sites together to give yourself the footprint you need. And part of that footprint is having the IP backhaul. Mm-hmm. I've got people using, wireless hotspots as fallbacks in case they lose their wired IP connectivity, and it works. I mean, if you walk in the booth now, hidden back in several places, you'll see, cellular to wireless routers being used to as part of the demonstration of things, and not only for POC but for networking into other sites, so we can give the customer a feel of what his network would look like as he goes forward. So we're very dependent on these guys, and of course you want to offload as much and as quickly as possible. If I'm pushing data over a narrowband channel, I've got to get it to the end user. We have applications that are showing up as a web-based browser for AVL, so guys can watch their cars move around, their trucks move around, and that's all dumped up onto the internet and pushed that way. We have applications where we're not high data rate. Our data rate at the best, raw data rate, 7,200 BPS, and that's knuckle dragging slow. It's dinosaur age. But the use of that and compression algorithms and things, and then handing it off to these guys is greatly enhanced our customers' experience. We've become a family of consumers because of the bloody smartphones, and everybody wants what the smartphone does till they push to talk and it doesn't work, and then they yell at me.
Oh, they never yell at you because it always works, right? Yeah. So in terms of on the cellular side, now Rishi, you were at Alcatel-Lucent once upon a time, right?
Yeah.
And so
Donnie gives me a hard time because I'm on a 5-year rotation. It's like a residency in mid school.
But it's very interesting from the standpoint of when you were at Alcatel-Lucent, and then you returned you went to Motorola for a while, and then you returned. That had to be a very different network design environment? I mean, so much of it's not even quote unquote hardware anymore. How much of
Yeah.
it's software?
Yeah, it's fascinating actually what's happened in the last 10 years. So I spent several years at Alcatel-Lucent, and we started this public safety broadband process back then, going all the way back to selling CDMA network for private broadband, not LTE, in Washington, D.C. And then evolving from there, which was tons of big iron, right? We had racks and racks of hardware for our core network, moving into now what is really our software running on commoditized hardware, which has really helped lower the cost of the infrastructure, which has been fantastic. So those advancements in technology have been great. The differences that I've seen in the commercial cellular world versus the public safety world is just network design and reliability, and the standards to which we build networks in public safety from a reliability perspective. We had a use case down in Mississippi where during the floods of Katrina, they lost connection to a site for 13 days, P25 site, 13 days, and it didn't go down. By the time they got to it, because the road was flooded, they just had to refill the generator, and it kept going. So those are the kinds of use cases that we have for public safety, and we need to mimic that in cellular, quite frankly, to make the case that my friend Don talked about of where that call doesn't drop now off your commercial looking device, because it won't be a commercial device in the hands of our first responders at that point. But those advancements and the way we design networks in cellular have to mimic the way we design P25 networks.
Okay. Justin, what has been the impact for you guys as a carrier having so much software in the network?
Yeah, I mean, it's really been a key thing for us in terms of just overall efficiencies. To the point earlier, we've been moving from having dedicated equipment, dedicated hardware that's proprietary. It's got software that's proprietary on it, and as I said earlier, just being trying to create a more collaborative environment. We've been able to take the software, make that really kind of the secret sauce that's proprietary, but run that on a more standardized hardware platform. And I think there's a little bit of a misnomer in terms of going from to virtualizing. Virtualizing doesn't mean we throw everything in the cloud. Virtualizing in this case, we virtualize the software that runs our cell sites, but it's still running on dedicated blades. It's just that those blades are now standardized, so that's a higher or lower cost for the operators to maintain that. And then really focus upon the software as well as our partners to be able to focus on the software to drive those improvements along.
That's a key point, is it's now, in the 10 years that we've been doing this, it's become an ecosystem play versus a one-stop shop for all things communications. And I think that fostering that ecosystem has helped our industry advance from a technology perspective.
Okay.
Coverages.
We're kind of the same way, is that, dedicated hardware is great, and we saw an evolution, especially in the developing of the digital protocols, to get it into some standards-based, instead of all written in low-level code, to get it into something that runs in real operating systems. And as we migrate into the next generation of a lot of this, is to do some virtualization, because you try to mimic some of what the cellular carriers are done in that area, so that you can better manage and build that radio network, so that you can bring in, especially in the specialized mobile radio operators world, the SMRs, to allow them to now start to combine their systems to build out a larger overall footprint for their customers.
And I hear software, and the first thing that comes to mind is, well, it obviously can be hacked then. Can you guys address kind of, is this, if it's done right, is it secure, and what should people be looking for to make sure, especially if they're trying to run business critical and mission critical items over these networks?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. From a carrier perspective, it's the same network that we've been running in terms of the IP data network infrastructure that addresses all of these different components. So whether it's virtualizing software or it's running proprietary software on a proprietary hardware platform, the security is the same. I mean, it really is a true walled garden. I mean, even the components that we've been talking about when it comes to private LTE and connecting into the network, that all comes in through a security gateway that we manage to make sure that any threats are blocked before they come into that walled garden, so that we can maintain security.
Do you feel like it actually gives you I mean, they're coming up with new stuff all the time to attack networks.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the fact that so much of it's in software actually helps you because there's no way to
Absolutely.
because you have a little more flexibility in terms of addressing some of those things quickly as opposed to having to physically go out to each site to change something?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the fact that you can do software updates, so if there was to be ever some kind of security threat, that we had to patch, you can do that a lot faster in that environment and across multiple platforms, not just dealing with one ecosystem, even if you work those in parallel, that takes time, but being able to do that faster in a software environment is good. And then I think there's also an opportunity to not have to worry about the hardware components of it, but just being able to manage your network, because it's self-optimizing. That's one of the key things that we wanted to go to a virtualized network, is that you can now self-optimize the remote radio heads, where whether it's the tilt of those devices or even just the capacity and bandwidth available to them. You have to have a virtualized platform to do that, and I think now we can manage that and see security threats pop up probably faster than we could previously.
Security is obviously top of mind for everybody, and it goes back to an ecosystem play. There's no one-stop solution for security. There's obviously putting up the wall and trying to stop anybody from getting in, but I think it was the latest breach either with Target or Equifax that they were in for months before they realized that someone was actually inside of their network. And I think we sometimes lose sight of, let's build a wall, but once someone gets in, because inevitably people get in, right? I don't think we're ever going to be able to stop it 100%. But once they're in, how do we quarantine that intrusion as quickly as possible is something that we also have to build into our kind of end-to-end security plan from an ecosystem perspective.
Or track where they went while they were in.
Okay, so now as we go look forward, Trey, I was talking to Don here and I asked him what kind of range he gets on an LMR site. He said, 30 miles.
30 miles.
30 miles. And then I was reading a white paper from Qualcomm about 5G, and they showed an urban area. They didn't identify what it was, but it was an urban area, and they said how many sites you need, per kilometer, and
Sure.
I can't think that way, so I had to turn it into square miles. And so for 28 gigs, it came out, I think, to 350 sites, I think, and for 39 gigs, 430 sites or something. How in the world can we pull that off?
So I think that sort of goes back to like what Justin was talking about, right? I mean, when you have 5G, it's all about densification. So when you densify a network, there's the traditional ways of densifying a network. Take your big box, go and get some permits filed, go and lease some pole rights, and go and get some power, and then go and get your line of sight and figure out your network planning and your site surveying and say, okay, sure, we need for this square block radius 300 sites. Okay, well now you've got 300 permits, 300 power sources, and 300 attachment or easement right-of-way rights that you also got to secure with those. We don't think that that's the case because our company creates a agnostic hardware platform that enables these operators to not only densify their network, but also for the communities and municipalities to sort of beautify the network that's being created as well.
Wait. Cell site and beautification. I see the heads of planning commissioners everywhere exploding. What do you mean? What do you mean? I enjoy my every other Thursday, and we yell at each other for an hour about how ugly these things are.
We've all seen, driving down the road, the big towers, and we've seen big small cells hanging on buildings and wires everywhere. It's not needed no more, right?
So where is your site?
So again, everything that Ubiquia, our company, does, it resides on the top of that photo cell. So we replace a simple replacement of a photo cell. We pop in either our UB cell, our UB hub, or our UB metro. Our UB metro, we can be CA, carrier aggregated, or we can be a dedicated host. For the likes of the operators like Verizon, they want a dedicated host, but they want coupled radios, right? They want multiple redundant backhaul options. We provide PLC backhaul, fiber, and Ethernet backhaul, all this while also providing your wireless, right? So with LAA and 5G, to your point, Qualcomm, right? Qualcomm, Huawei, Ericsson, Nokia, they're all broadcasting gigabit speed. But then there's that little, what I'll call a disclaimer, right? That disclaimer is at what distance? That distance is 100 to 200 meters. So that's from here maybe to the front of this building, and that's the distance that they can operate at that gigabit speed. So as the carriers, operators, and consumers alike are all trying to sort of meet in the middle for that demand of high-speed data traffic, all this while also dealing with all the IoT traffic. Can't forget about the narrowband, right? We got to move all that as well. You know, how do you really do so? And we believe that the way in which to do so is by going and grabbing the persistenceness and the pervasiveness of the power that's already supplied via the top of the street light. We have a simple little device that plugs in. You can barely see it at 35 feet above your head. And again, because we're 35 feet above the target device, whether that's for intelligent transportation or mobile phones, you have that constant high-speed communication. And each street light is 50 meters apart. So now it just comes out to, okay, Verizon has a hole here, great. No more needing big 300, 400 foot towers and, oh, we want to be at, 70 foot height and 3 meters out and a 6 foot width. No, we're going to put you at intersection A, okay? Sprint will be at intersection B, T-Mobile at intersection C. I mean, you got 4 corners to a thing and you got 4 operators in an area, right? So they're able to densify all this while not having to have these big wires hanging everywhere, right? Okay. So you got beautification as well.
All right. Well, so now, and to put these up, I mean, do I need to be an RF engineer to?
Absolutely not. So self-organizing, self-healing, plug-and-play environments. We operate on Ericsson's core. Ericsson's actually one of our largest worldwide partners. We operate on their RAN core. It's already plugged in with Verizon, with Sprint, with T-Mobile, Deutsche Telekom, Vodafone software. So it's already running their core. They're simple plug and plays.
Okay, and there are other solutions out there in terms of other things. I think I've seen trash compactors with 5G cells in them, and manhole covers. I still
seen a bunch of these things that again all require third-party power supplies, permitting, and attachment rights.
But the bottom line is, if it's not moving, suddenly somebody can connect to it almost.
Sure.
Well, so first off, Justin, does this stuff work?
Absolutely. I mean, actually, these are use cases we've had for a while. I think the trash compactor was probably one of the first smart community connected devices I think we had on the LTE network. And what's interesting about that too, I mean, now you've got devices that are fixed talking to those street lights, and they become community or citizen engagement for the city, as well as advertising platforms. So now you're creating new revenue streams. So I think creating more of a partnership between the operators and partners like Trey, as well as the communities, really creates a nice ecosystem that benefits all. I mean, rather than just a back and forth in terms of making things beautiful.
Takes a cost center and turns it into a profit center, all this while creating a partnership, right?
Well, and that's actually where I wanted to go next, was just from the standpoint of what opportunities are out there.
Can I ask a question
please.
first? Can I put this on my goats?
On your goat.
My goats, yeah.
If your goat had a NEMA socket and it had some sort of power supply.
I don't think they have a the power supply is not a problem. NEMA socket may be a little difficult.
There you go.
$395 at Granger, Gray Bar, right?
Yeah, I guess listening, you're talking about street lights and all. Rural broadband seems to be the big thing, and I live in the country, so DSL is.
You got a barn?
Yeah. Oh,
no. You have a light on that barn?
No, I don't put it outside lights.
Okay.
I don't like the light pollution. I'm sorry.
Gotcha.
But no. But if you build me a barn, I'll put a light on it.
Give me your goat. I might build you a barn.
Well, but you know what? That kind of deal is exactly what is happening in every municipality all over. Hey, build me. Hey, if you'll put a trash compactor in, I'll let you have the site. Or if you'll, we need to change out our street lights. We want something that's more energy efficient. And what are the kind of the deals that you all are seeing, and are people starting to think outside of the box? It used to be, oh, you're a carrier, you're asking me, and I'm a permitting, and I'm gonna hound you and get a big permitting fee out of you. And Are you seeing that change in
I think
terms of
there's
more
a lot
partners?
of give and take personally in terms, especially with a lot of these PPPs, right? So you've got the operators, the utility, and the municipalities that are all now starting to work together, right? Whereas previously, you know, the utility is charging the municipality X fee for the electricity that's powering their common roadways and their parks and rec. Then you have the operators that are paying attachment leasing right fees to be placed into this city, and then there's the permitting that's associated with that as well. Whereas now you have the utilities and municipalities that are coming together saying, okay, we have lighting control, for example. Okay, we'll give you the lighting control, and maybe that's subsidized by Verizon. Verizon's going to control your lights, give you intelligent dimming, intelligent scheduling between the hours of 1:30 a.m. and 4 a.m. We don't need these lights to be 100%. We're gonna save you 35% of that traffic right there. In exchange for that, we would like preferential placement on Main Street, you know, street light A, B, or C. And then the other likes of the other system integrators and, you know, other, you know, private partnership aspects that come in and will maybe even underwrite that system and say, okay, we'll share in the cost savings. We're going to stand up this network, and this network is not only going to be for DOT, for maintenance, for operations, for utilities, for carriers and consumers, but it's one big sort of coverage network that is both narrowband and broadband capable, and it's already deriving the same power from the same source, right? So,
So Trey painted a fantastic 100,000-foot picture, right? But I think we need to break that down into what is actually feasible today and how we can plan for the quote-unquote smart city, and that collaboration between the utility organizations, the municipalities, the states, and public safety. We have to keep public safety in this discussion. I think that's sometimes we lose. We're so far down the smart city path and what it's going to do from an economic development perspective. We have to keep in mind that public safety is probably the top priority in our urban environment now. And the things we can do with pole attachments and light poles around video surveillance and things that are now evolving with 5G and the capacity we can get in the operator networks and the slicing we can do within those networks to enable public safety within the public-private partnership for smart cities is paramount to drive security in our country.
Well, and the thing I've just been blown away by is looking at the latency numbers. I mean, there basically is no latency, right? One millisecond is what they're looking at.
What used to be fiber to every camera or you know, high throughput Wi-Fi or something to every camera is now changed to 5G wireless connectivity in cameras, all the way from an end-to-end perspective from the camera back to the data center to run analytics and actually make that whole process function in real time is really what 5G is going to enable us to do.
So let's take that, just that little thought process there. So let's take one street. We'll call it this white line here. This one street, there's 10 H.265, 5 megapixel high-speed cameras that are constantly aggregating this data and backhauling that data off the network. That's 85 megabits per second is what is needed, required for throughput to power those 10 H.265 cameras, right? So something has to backhaul that data. So we know the likes of Verizon and Sprint and everybody are dropping fiber rings in these cities. They have the attachment rights to put up a camera. That stream is going to some monitoring center, right? Whether that's, call it IBM's Watson or some other private organization that's monitoring this. And that's going to now trigger some alert or alarm to law enforcement to say, okay, we have this going on here, and now we're live streaming this, right? Take London. London is the largest CCD city in the world, right? I mean, they've been doing this forever. Singapore, I believe, is number 2. And the problem has always been, how do you backload all that data out? Who's viewing that data and who's paying for that data? Because if Verizon comes and lays in a fiber ring, is that now their data? They're going to take all of that data and say, okay, we have this video feed, we're going to license it to you? Or is that just going to be bypassed, streamed through, utilizing, you know, the existing core network, right? Yeah. Drop or hop has always sort of been the key. But how do you power these devices? How do you backhaul all these devices when you've got, that's one street that has 10, but now you've got how many other main streets within a community, right?
You know, it's interesting, when that happens, we change the workflow of public safety, quite frankly. And what we've seen evolving over the last several years is this whole concept of real-time crime centers, where all that data is becoming aggregated, running through analytics, and trying to do pre-threat detection type of work. And we've created a new function inside of the public safety agency to actually help analyze that data and respond to it very quickly. So I see our workflow changing drastically, not only now, but well into the future when we can get access to this kind of data.
Sure. So I think it was it Kyle Connor from Cisco yesterday that said that, so all these networks, right, so all these devices on the edge, all these cameras, and all this narrowband data, we're moving 14 zettabytes? Is that the number that we saw yesterday?
Yeah, I didn't even know what it was.
So I'd like to ask Verizon here, since we have Justin here. So, Justin, do you want to move 14 zettabytes over your LTE network?
Well, I mean, I think that network slicing, I think, is one of the key things that 5G will bring us.
Sure.
And there's also the concept of mobile edge computing. So I think
Mobile edge computing, absolutely.
mobile edge computing
Edge
combined
processing
with
as
network
well.
slicing allows us the capabilities where we wanted to cross the network, but that Verizon network might be a little slice of a network, not the full network back to these other data centers that we might be running today. So I think that'll allow us to create a much more manageable network where you can actually have that much data running across it.
It's a lot of data.
And the reason why I say you want to keep it across that is obviously I think you want consistency, you want interoperability, you want the security that comes with it. So I think that those are the reasons why that we feel that both 4G and 5G are technologies that create that environment so that you don't have to have ecosystem partners across the nation or even across the globe all doing the same thing. You can get economies of scale, but then create these smaller networks that are super dense that create the right on-ramps and off-ramps so that the right people can get to the data, but they can get to the data in a very secure manner.
Well, let's back up. I mentioned we talk about smart cities, which are great. Intelligent transportation, that's been talked about for years. And a lot of this is coming to fruition because simply now we have the pipe sizes and all. But still the United States is 83% rural. And so how do you handle getting this capability? Because, small sheriff department, he still has the same policing activities. He's still doing the same thing. Small fire departments, they're still doing the same activities. Businesses, they still have to carry on. They've, supposedly there's this, rural broadband initiative, which is very difficult to deploy. And we've got, satellite trying to attack it. Now we're trying to fly balloons and attack it and all. And how do we deal with it? How can we get the carriers? I mean, it's an economy of scale thing. You typically, and I've dealt with this in several places, and FirstNet's kind of dealing with this too. How do you make it affordable when you don't have the demographics to completely support? We all have to make money. We all have to have the ROI, but how do we bring these networks? How do we scale these networks into rural America to get their throughput?
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the things that we did with 4G. We created an LTE in Rural America program, to help just that. I mean, we had lots of partners, over 20 of them nationwide that had, a vision for creating that coverage, but didn't have the economies of scale. So we were able to connect them back into the Verizon core so that they can have access to the core services, be able to do things that they probably wouldn't be able to do on their own. So I think that's a start. I think that it's gone. I mean, it's been, like I said earlier, this is our 8th year now. I think that we've seen some really good success out of that, but I certainly feel like there's probably more collaboration needed in the rural markets, and that's probably a focus area for us in the next year to two.
Are you looking at particular sectors or agencies to deal with that? I mean, there's a lot of rural membership cooperatives here. Rural Electrification Act of 1920. Do you remember what the date is?
I wasn't there.
It wasn't there. It wasn't there. Neither was I. But, having grown, I grew up in a city, but spent a lot of time in the country and live in the country now. Grandparents lived on the farm and things like that. Is, bringing electrification and telephony into the space. That was a big deal. I mean, there was places in the United States that didn't have, decent telephone service till the late 50s. And it's great on corridors in many places, and all the carriers have their footprint. Verizon's got a great one. But to bring into the technology to raise, I mean, if you go into rural Georgia, My wife and I drove back from Florida one time, and I'm going through old areas because my dad covered 25 counties in rural Georgia, and they haven't changed and people left. And so to rebuild these communities is to bring into these areas the technology that will support their base, because a lot of these they have no real industry because they don't have the infrastructure to support it. Now in the data world, and really that's necessary. You've got, I mean, if you're running a simple factory, you can't be without the connectivity back. And so how do we bring that as a group? I mean, talk from the land mobile sector, but I really believe in technology convergence. We've got to bring these technologies together because, not only does it, it improves our bottom line, of course. Everybody's got to make money, but it also proves the ability to raise the living scale of living, where people can have higher paying jobs and things like this, and we're not talking about a living wage, because everyone has a living wage.
So,
How do we bring this back in?
I keep reading and hearing about IoT for farmers and things like that. Is that maybe an avenue to maybe get to the point Don's trying to make?
Yeah, I think there's definitely opportunities there. I mean, like I said earlier, the technology with private LTE has dramatically lowered the cost of entry to create an LTE network that can interoperate back to a commercial grade network. But I also think that there's probably an opportunity to collaborate across industry. So we have lots of these same conversations with our energy and utility customers, as well as our railroad customers. So I think that they've been helping drive this with positive chain control. Creating coverage across the rails, but again, how do you get that and then broaden that? So I think there's certainly an opportunity to create more complicated networks, and I think that's what we've really been doing. The complexities of the networks where we have coverage today will allow us to then bring that into some of the rural areas as well.
Justin hit the nail on the head. We're in the infancy of the modernization of distribution electric utilities, and the rural case is easily solved by the utility provider in that area. And the advancements in technology, again, whether it's fixed wireless, 5G, network slicing, interoperability with the major operators, we can solve the rural broadband case fairly easily once we get the utilities to move into a broadband world and consolidate their network infrastructure into broadband.
Okay. We've been focused on what's next in the cellular world. Don, what do you think is next in the LMR world? Okay, you invented a really cool new protocol that only takes one kilohertz channel and stuff.
Well, it's 4 kilohertz of occupied bandwidth, which single sideband is 3 kilohertz of occupied bandwidth. So it was a big leap forward. Is it ended? No, because we're still primarily FM, frequency modulation. And what we really need to do within our industry, complacency, you get complacent because you're making money off this. Land mobile is shrinking. We have to evolve. And in the case I said technology convergence. We have to converge the technologies, because I'm a firm believer, and I've been saying this for years, you have a private switch network and a public switch network, and you'll roam between the two. The customer doesn't care if it's a bologna sandwich doing it. He just needs his data, he needs his voice. That's all he cares about. He doesn't care as long as he's got a device in his hand and it works. And we've had many conversations of the ability to roam between the types of networks. You go out of the range of your land mobile network. It doesn't preclude the need to be able to communicate back into your land mobile network. So we roam into an LTE world and back and forth, or we roam into a satellite world back and forth. They need to communicate. Railroads are a big case. You talked about PTC, and we've lived with that, and it's really funny. PTC has gotten dedicated frequencies, but the railroads have thought ahead, and they said, well, what if we have a failure? Can we use this or this or this or this to backhaul. You know, maybe we can't backhaul the same amount of data because of the bandwidth, but we need to get that information back because we don't need trains running into each other. So you're going to see, I think, more and more technology convergence. I think we have to move to spectral efficient modulation types that can handle data better and all, can handle voice better. It's just going to be an evolutionary process, but we have to take the blinders off and be working diligently in those directions.
Okay, so he was just talking about 4 kilohertz.
4 kilohertz occupied bandwidth, yes.
Okay. What would you do with that, Justin, at Verizon?
Probably not enough. I mean, I think that, you know, where we're looking at, I think, you know, just to kind of play out some of the things just mentioned, you know, it used to be, if I want to go cellular, it was, I had a choice between CDMA or GSM, whatever it might be. And I try to get that cost down as much as possible, put it into whatever widget I was building. And in LTE now we have choices. So we've got different device categories, and that's really helped create even more innovation in terms of the device ecosystem, so that I'm choosing, do I want to, you know, provide a very, you know, a video surveillance that needs high category device. So I need a Cat 11 device that's going to do carrier aggregation and 4x4 MIMO and things like that, or am I doing something that's going to be moving around at, you know, and require lower bandwidth, and I can go down to a category M1 device. We now have narrowband IoT coming later this year, and that's 180 kilohertz, so a little bit bigger, but it's guard band. So I've now taken spectrum we're already using, and now I can use the guard band in a more effective way, similar to how, you know, DSL was able to use that for telephone lines, you know, previously.
Very cool. Well, now your colleague Arvin was on one of the 5G panels earlier this week, and said that you guys have, I believe, between in the millimeter wave band, at least 450 megahertz of spectrum.
Absolutely.
Nationwide, and up to 1,000 megahertz of spectrum in certain areas. What would you do with that? That's a lot of 4 kilohertz
a lot of 4 kilohertz
channels.
I'd make a lot of people really happy. If I had that much spectrum, what I'd probably do is create a very nice LTE network.
Assuming you had the 100 billion or whatever.
Yeah,
around.
if I had it, you know, it's one thing in the States. You talked about private LTE, but we're moving private LTE over into unlicensed spectrum, and but there's another wording they've got. It's licensed, but it's not the
shared access.
Yeah, shared access. Thank you. You know, it would be great to have that much spectrum, and I do not say LTE tongue in cheek. I really believe. I watched LTE's evolution, you know, come about. Long-term evolution. I wasn't a big fan at the beginning because you're looking at it and going, what the heck is it? LTE, long-term evolution. And then the more I looked at it, the more I became more of a fan of it and going, yeah, I can do a lot of stuff in it. And I can heavily load it. And what we're really missing in our marketplace is we really don't have a private LTE spectrum to set aside. You can do waivers and you can do all things, but if I'm a small department, a police department, a utility, and I really need the throughput, I can't stand up on a private LTE network because I don't have the spectrum. So the lack of that spectrum and defining, and you go into other places in the world, yeah, I can license a private LTE system, but I can't really do it here. PDV Wireless is attempting to do that at 900 megahertz, but we're under the FCC mandate to whether you've got to move people from, it's rebanding, you've got to move people from the upper portion to the lower portion, and then what's the interference case, and we really need to define this band, and I don't think it's below a gig, but I think it's less than 3 gigs to be really useful in our marketplace. One is propagation. You know, higher in frequency is great, but the density doesn't meet my economy of scale because my scale is much, much smaller than a cellular scale.
All right.
You know, Don brings up a good point, and actually it's solved by a technology that I love that Ericsson's innovating into is really network slicing. It would be ideal for all of us to be able to get our own spectrum, stand up our own private network in our little geography and be successful in that way. It's not going to happen, right? I think we've established that over the last 10 years in the FirstNet debate and public safety broadband debate. But the next best thing, in my opinion, is slicing out of the operator's network. And it's something that all the big operators are doing to help enable our mission critical industries to get as close to possible private.
And what do you mean by slicing? How is that different than, say, a VPN?
Well, because the VPN is just in your access layer of your network. Slicing gives you a little bit more control into the network, and you can actually go into a slice from an end-to-end perspective, device all the way through your core. This is an evolving standard right now, and it's going to be prevalent in 5G, I believe, as our vertical markets evolve in what they need from a private network perspective.
Okay. All right. I apologize. I'm dominating the thing. Questions? By the way, if anyone has a question, I'm out there, right here.
Yeah,
The CBRS band, how does that fit in, do you think?
so Verizon would certainly consider CBRS a part of our private LTE portfolio. So that's just one of the spectrums that will be available to use, and that is a shared access. So some public, some licensed, and we see that as being a key part of that because you can use that 3.5 gigahertz, but you're still going to have to manage whether or not, how far that reaches. So I mean, I think that it's still going to be very similar to like a Wi-Fi network in terms of the propagation. And then also we need to drive a device ecosystem. So I think that's one of the things that's really critical. We're starting to see the device ecosystem at least pick up from a commercial model, but then there's some questions about, where do we want to take that into the public safety? Where do we want to take that into IoT? So I think those are some of the things that we're thinking through right now.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of CBRS. If we can get the license model right, which is a big question mark. But for some of the next generation use cases in public safety and in the utility space, CBRS is a great fit.
Especially in terms of utility space.
Yep.
What's that?
Especially in terms of utility space.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, I think part of the problem from the land mobile side, and I think it's probably problem from the carrier side, is we've looked at each other's competitors for many, many years. We had a lot of churn, you use the cellular churn for the base and 10, the smaller stuff into cellular because of the economics. But I still have people on the land mobile side that don't like paying recurring. Although we're living in a recurring world and they're already, on their personal phones, they're already paying a recurring charge. I think we need to do a better job in both spaces to understand that we're providing communications. And we have to work closer together to provide the customer a solution. And I taught my guys when I was in R&D was if you had a customer call you and we didn't sell what they needed, help them find somebody to give it to them. You don't lose a customer that way. You gain an ally because maybe you don't have what he needs today, but you may have what he needs tomorrow and he's going to remember and call you. So having to move somebody to cellular for me because he needs the footprint is just part of being good customer service and helping your customer do this job. The golden rule is still the golden rule. You want to help them out. We need to do a better job instead of looking at each other as competitors, as partners in providing communications.
Okay, very cool. Any other questions from the audience? So one of the big items that's out here that's been discussed this week is Tband. Public safety, when they created FirstNet, part of that law said public safety needed to get off the Tband between 470 and 512 megahertz. And the idea was that they would auction it in 2021 and the public safety would need to be off by 2023. That law is still on the books. There's not any place for them to go right now in an LMR world. But the thing is that when that law was passed, we were still in the idea of we need to be under 3 gigahertz, and now that's changed dramatically. And I'm just wondering, guys, what do you all think? Even if that spectrum was out there, do you really think it would?
Would you bid on it?
Bid a lot?
Buck 250?
Yeah. Justin, have you got any thoughts as to?
I mean, obviously we look at all spectrum in terms of, what could it help us do in our plans. I think that, we've got our hands busy on our 5G, deployment. I think that, one of the critical things there for us too, as well as driving the 5G ecosystem. We started with a technology forum, and now we'll be moving to the new radio standard, which, obviously we felt that be very successful that it came in so early. But as we look towards that deployment, we really want to create more of a pure 5G. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's our focus right now is how do you unlock the potential of 5G in a manner, and you need to have these gigantic, bandwidths, like 400 to 800 megahertz of bandwidth operating at that frequency to be able to unlock the true 5G potential. So I think there's obviously a need for more spectrum at some point in the future, but
But in terms of low band, I mean, especially now, Sprint's never bid on low band, and AT&T just got the FirstNet spectrum. You guys have got a very healthy low band, and T-Mobile just got a lot of low band in the incentive auction, right?
Yeah.
So they're at 30 to 50 megahertz?
Yeah, I know. It's a different, yeah, exactly. That happens a lot. Low band here does not mean equal low band here. Low band in cellular is very different from low band in LMR.
Darn near HF.
Any other questions out there? The other thing, you mentioned propagation. How has, I remember there was a time when, hey, we were counting on that macro tower shooting out with enough power, and it'll give me some in-building coverage. How has that changed?
I think it's what we built previously. I think the same dynamics are still in place. I think as we look at getting lower and tighter in terms of the coverage, densifying the network. Obviously, we get to get some changes and some efficiencies there, so maybe that changes the way we look at things. But one of the interesting things I saw was some of the 5G deployments that are already being done in South Korea. They were able to show a study of how a millimeter wave base stations actually performed within 1% coverage as their existing megahertz or base stations. So I think that there's obviously still a lot of work to be done, but I think over the past 2 years as we've been driving 5G standards, we're seeing how the physics of the millimeter wave actually will get closer and closer in terms of how we propagate.
But if I have low E glass or something, it's not
Well, that's the importance of having in-building solutions.
Well, and that's what I was going to do. That's where I was going. Was do you see more and more in-building solutions happening? Really, and is it frankly easier to plan if I'm doing in-building than I'm not even worried about whether. In fact, I don't want it to penetrate.
Well, even as Trey mentioned earlier about putting things in light poles, and the technology to do that, you have to virtualize the RAN and centralize the RAN, and so we've already been working on separating the baseband units from the remote radio heads. So we've already laid the foundation for that type of deployment, and that's going to help us get to that point where those remote radio heads could be in building, they could be on different street furniture, but we certainly have lots more in our tool belt to be able to deal with the propagation needs.
Okay.
You're talking about densification of networks, which is interesting, because I've been preaching, because spectrum, even our spectrum and the requirements are so strict anymore, is to reduce ERPs, increase site density, just so you need to cover what you need to cover and not a whole lot more. Mm-hmm. It's really important to even bring down in the land mobile sector, because people get caught up. I mean, this is a big thing. We're going to put this non-DVD stick on top of this mountain. Well, I don't need to talk 3 to 6 counties over. I just need to talk in my county. And so even trying to bring that, everybody's always more power, more footprint. Well, really, do you need that footprint? So you really need to talk. We've been talking about for years to bring this down into a smaller footprint to give coverage. Even when you're talking low E glass and all, we have problems with that. I mean, I worked in the RFID tag world, and we had issues where we had to put toll tags on bumpers because it just didn't get through the glass and all. And so even reducing your in-building interference because you're trying to get rid of the outside sources, it's real important. I mean, RF's RF. I mean, 1/r square hasn't changed.
Never will.
So we have to be smart how we do things, and what we see is it's a universal problem for all of us.
Okay. Trey, I guess how much uptake are you seeing on the smart city stuff in terms of actually being able to get for the city to say, yeah, I'm getting a return here that's obviously worth it to me. You have some stuff that's intangible, like the improved public
Sure.
safety and things like that.
Sure.
And then how much of it's something where they can, so the accounting guy can say, yeah, that paid for itself. That was a good idea.
So we're doing, for example, we're doing a project with Ericsson. It's the largest narrowband IoT deployment, right, for smart cities for the city of Zapopan in Mexico. And I think it's the largest one that's actually been put out to date. And the ROI for the city to actually see something that helps them, and all this while, I mean, yesterday we spoke sort of about, people want to go and stand up a tower, and you got one person saying, oh, the microwave here is radiating, the school on the other side of the hill, right? And, so we want to go and now put all these other antennas and whips and, systems, radio systems out there. We haven't been seeing the pushback from the cities or the municipalities, nor the operators, because I think the education to all of these governing bodies of the benefits that they're actually getting while standing up these networks, having, for us, lower power, higher density units out there. It's been great. It's been a blessing I think, for ourselves, for Ericsson, as we've pushed this through, and the municipalities are definitely seeing the ROI. The utilities are happy. The carrier that we partner with down there as well, is happy as well. So.
All right, excellent. Any last questions? All right, well, I'm going to wrap up. I want to thank our panelists here for putting up with me all this time. And thank you all for being here. And I really want to urge you all to please stay. We're going to, as soon as we get off the stage, the Young Professional Awards are going to be happening here. So please stick around. But thank you, panelists. You guys did great. Thanks.